So I'm a really big fan of horror manga or anything horror and scary in general, but this story got a little too real for me, so I can only imagine how real it got for the author, because I'm learning about this new article today that I'm going to read for you guys. As I try to expand my content a little bit and just show you guys some stuff that I find interesting, here's the story of the horror manga so scary that it started leaking into the real world and its mangaka had to quit writing it. It's a really crazy story, but thanks to the article over at animesenpai.net, I'm going to link it in the description below, and I am going to be reading from it in this video, so thank you to the writer for sharing this information with us, and let's go over it. Let's see what we think about this horror manga pretty much haunting its own author. So shout out to Umer on animesenpai.net. Let's get to it. The title of the article was Horror Manga Author Had to Quit Drawing After Creepy Incidents Started Happening to Him, and this was published December 10th, 2022, but I was only just recently made aware of it, and I'm definitely going to go read this manga after, even at the risk that I myself will be haunted. And I guess I'm going to do that so that you don't have to if you're worried. The article states, it's not every day when you hear a mangaka quit his job to stay alive. You wonder what a piece of fiction can do to a writer who is using his imagination to write, but when you read everything that happened to the mangaka before he was forced to quit the manga, you might understand why he stopped writing this manga. PTSD Radio is a horror manga that Maasaki Nakayama started. It started publishing on 7 July 2010, and to this day has published 6 volumes available physically as 3 omnibus edition copies, with each copy having 2 volumes. Only the first omnibus volume is available now, and the other 2 volumes will be released on 17 January and 9 May 2023. So I guess this person is not American, because that's not how we write our dates here, but I think in the rest of the world they do it a little bit differently. So from this article we learned that the last time the manga was updated was in 2018, and this manga is published by Kodansha, and the mangaka of course does have other horror series, like one that you may know called Seeds of Anxiety. And I think from what I'm learning about this manga in this article that it does sound like it has a really interesting concept, right? It's a manga called PTSD Radio, and every chapter is named after a specific radio frequency, and there's kind of an infinite amount of those. Or not infinite, but there's a large amount of those possible. So I think that's a really interesting naming convention for the manga, but also apparently in every chapter, you get these sort of one-off stories that sometimes link together and intertwine, and I really like stuff like that, because it does remind me, like this article states, of Junji Ito's work. The legendary prolific horror author Junji Ito, famous for, I can name a million projects, but he's probably going to be most well known soon in the future for Uzumaki, which is going to be airing on Toonami, and I do expect that project to be really special. So what is it that happened that made this author want to quit writing his horror manga? Well, apparently, according to Umer in the article, a few years before this manga started serialization, the mangaka rented a workplace where he could work on his future projects. He also hired a team to work on this manga, as all mangaka hire assistants to complete chapters quickly, but the incidents that followed are the reason that he quit writing manga. The landlord of his place was an older man. One day, the mangaka got into a misunderstanding of him regarding the rent, and at that moment, the landlord made a twisted face in anger, which the mangaka took inspiration from and drew in his manga. And we do have an image here of the face that was drawn in the manga, and let me just tell you, if that is genuinely the face that his landlord made when they were having whatever sort of dispute they were having, that is horrifying. That is not what I would call a very natural face. All the lines and everything everywhere. I have to believe that this was drawn very well from memory. Maybe he added a little to it, turned up the creep factor a little bit, but just the fact that there was some real life inspiration from things that made it into the manga and it's this creepy, I really don't like that. Now, apparently the first thing that the mangaka and his team discovered about his new place was that there was a broken shrine nearby, and shrines are very important in Japan. This article goes on to say that shrines are sacred places where people come to worship, and of course, the Japanese, from what I've learned about them, are very superstitious sometimes, right? So certain things, they can just seem like a bad omen and make people very uncomfortable. So when you have a shrine, which is supposed to be like a sacred monument, split in half, that kind of seems like maybe something unholy or something scary was going on there to cause that to happen. And I'm sure people in the nearby area would definitely see that as a sign of a bad omen. But apparently the mangaka didn't actually pay that much attention to this because he was way too busy actually doing the manga and trying to meet deadlines. But later on, the whole team alongside the author face incidents like scratching around the ceiling of their new place, the smell of raw sewage from the building, and lights switching off unexpectedly. Now, all this stuff is sort of explainable as you just got a bad building, right? It sounds like bad plumbing, it sounds like bad electrician work, it sounds like maybe you have some sort of pest or something in your walls or in your ceiling. All of that is not necessarily paranormal in and of itself, but it's this next piece of information, I think, that really began to creep the manga author and his assistant out. Apparently, things escalated when some team members started to witness shadows inside of the building. After this, some of the staff even quit, and some fell ill. So some people got sick after seeing these shadows, with others just deciding, no, this is not for me, I'm getting out of here. So that means regardless of whether or not maybe they saw one of their own shadows on the wall or something, whatever they saw was enough to completely spook them and make them quit an ongoing manga. And I don't know, I can't imagine that those jobs are the easiest to find, so I'm sure whatever it definitely was pretty scary, but I would also be really worried if my coworkers start getting sick. Now, all of these incidents ended up causing the mangaka to move out of this location, but the issue is, that's not where the problem stopped. In fact, when the mangaka moved away from this location, he actually suddenly got very, very sick, and he goes on to describe the situation at the end of his manga. He says, black gelatinous blood blisters formed all over my lips, tongue, and gums and wouldn't stop bleeding. On top of that, my body was covered in hematomas, which are clotted blood spots, and I started seeing blood in my urine and stool. I knew this was no joke, so I got checked out at the hospital. And the thing is, when he got to the hospital trying to do a checkup on exactly what was going on with him, the doctor at the hospital said, Nakayama-san, please admit yourself to the hospital immediately. Something was very, very wrong. The mangaka, Mr. Nakayama, was very confused, like, hey, what's going on? Like, I really don't know how bad this is. What's wrong with me? And the doctor tells him, you're gonna die at this rate, Nakayama-san. Currently, your body has virtually no platelets. And for those of you who don't know what platelets are pretty much just small colorless fragments of cells that are more or less just tiny blood cells that help your body form clots to stop bleeding. And if one of your vessels gets damaged, it sends out a signal to your body to activate those platelets and get them to the right location so you don't just bleed out from a minor cut or something like that. But the issue is that the author had suddenly apparently developed a disease called idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, shortened down to ITP for anyone who doesn't feel like saying that 3 times fast. But that's a condition in which platelets decrease abnormally in the body, and that pretty much stops all blood clotting, which is something that you absolutely don't want, because this led to unexpected bleeding internally and externally. Now, the creepiest part of this is that in the manga, the mangaka had actually drawn a very similar situation to what he ended up getting in real life with this disease, with him drawing a person who was vomiting up blood and losing blood in their body, and eventually from the blood came demons. Demons crawled out of the blood on the ground, and I'm sure when he started vomiting blood, or when blood started coming from his body, he was definitely very scared that something similar was going to be happening to him. Now, that actually wasn't the end of Mr. Nakayama's problems, because sadly he also was diagnosed with another situation where one side of his face swelled up apparently like a balloon, and because of this somehow his body temperature dropped very, very harshly. And that was the final straw. That was enough for this mangaka to say, all right, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know what's going on here, but I don't think I'm going to be continuing this manga anymore. And that was the end of PTSD Radio. Now, interestingly enough, even if this mangaka already gave up on the one manga that he had that was giving him so much pain and anxiety in the real world that he actually thought he was being haunted by it, he still is working on another horror manga. I know, crazy, because you would think after a situation like this, I would just start writing the happiest stuff ever, or something that has nothing to do with horrific events. But this guy ended up treading on, and he's still writing his manga Seeds of Anxiety, otherwise known as Fuwan no Tane, to this day. I believe the manga is still going on. So that probably tells us that the mangaka probably has seen some sort of improvement in his health, since he is still working to this day. And I do wish Mr. Maasaki Nakayama the best in the future, just from a distance, because I definitely don't want to start getting haunted myself. Now, I'm thinking about doing some sort of read-through of this manga. I definitely want to read it just to see what the events were depicted like in the series itself, and I'm a massive fan of horror, like I said at the beginning of the video. But for more interesting stories like this, please let me know that that's what you guys want to see by getting this video to 600 likes, and we'll try to look for more interesting stuff like this, or interesting stories like this from across the web, with this really, really strange occurrence being something that I'm sure is going to be really rare to find, because wow, mangaka's manga starts haunting him is really something that kind of just feels like the plot of a manga. What do you think? Was this all some sort of big coincidence, or is the manga genuinely haunting the author? And do you think he was correct for putting the pen down and saving himself all the anxiety that apparently this series was causing him with these hauntings? Let me know in the comment section below, and thank you again to animesenpai.net. Leave in the link to the article below if you want to read it in detail, and the name of the mangaka in the comment section if you want to look it up a little more, and I'll even leave the title of the manga in the description below. But yeah, read it at your own risk, because I don't know, I definitely don't like the idea of being haunted.